Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast. My name is Manny and
And I'm Adam Hartung.
We are Spark Partners. Please go to our website, sparkpartners.com, to learn more about how we can help you and your business grow your career. On our website, we've got lots of resources, including additional podcasts, training materials, ebooks, and other things that you can look at to help your business grow. So we're going to be doing a handful of small business highlights here in this month and into the next. And so for today's highlight, we are featuring a company called Desert Pearl Mushrooms. And they have been around since 2018 and are essentially going through and locally growing mushrooms like oyster mushrooms and lion's mane mushrooms and other ones that are not the most common and are actually kind of hard to grow. So I'd like to bring them on here in a minute or so. And until they come on, let's see here. Here they are.
Hello.
All right.
Oh,
goodness. Hey, gentlemen, how you doing?
pretty good. How are you?
Great. So I want to introduce you to my partner, Adam Hartung.
Nice to meet you. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Congrats on the sale of your house in Vegas, I think. Is this the same one?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, same one. And so we have John G. Lorenzo and Kristopher Savage, who are the founders and operators of this company. So I want to start with a couple questions, guys, and get your thoughts. Why mushrooms, and why now?
Well, mushrooms are kind of a niche vegetable product. You don't really see too many of them in the grocery store. And a lot of our trends, and as far as pop culture goes, a lot of people are pushing for new sources of meat, or as far as full proteins, and mushrooms are a complete protein. So our opinion is that in the next, decade or 10 years, you're going to see a lot more consumption of like proteins that are plant-based, and mushrooms are going to satisfy that need for a lot of different people who would usually consume meat or just looking for a meat alternative.
Okay.
It also adds I just want to add, it also adds another component to culinary preparation. You get different textures and flavor profiles from mushrooms. If you're used to portobello or cremini, you're pretty much locked into that earthy field mushroom. Our mushrooms that we grow are tree-based mushroom varieties, and the flavor ranges anywhere from on the savory spectrum up through nutty. And we've got some mushrooms that kind of taste like seafood, some mushrooms that taste like meat, one that tastes like pork. It even has the snappy skin of a sausage casing when you bite into it. So there's so many different textures and flavors you can play with. So when Kris mentions meat substitutes, they actually bring some of the qualities that people who weren't born vegetarian or born vegan, they tend to miss. So
That's very interesting. Adam, you got some questions?
Well, were these the factors that were driving you when you first got into business?
I think the factors that drove us when we first got into business is that we saw people buying it at the farmer's market and we could make money from it.
Can I elaborate on that?
I don't even know if most people go into business, it's usually a dumb idea and then they just go for it. And I would honestly say that was kind of what we did in the beginning. It was like a knee jerk, like, oh my God, people are buying this product. We could expand on that.
I want to give a little more context to this. We started as an aquaponics project, backyard, trying to grow fish and some herbs and vegetables. And the greenhouse was a little light on carbon dioxide. And plants traditionally, they'll breathe CO2 and exhale oxygen. And so we tried to figure out, okay, what's going wrong here? Well, your plants are too efficient. What does that mean? Well, they're just sucking out all the CO2, and so they're starving themselves. Okay, so what do we need to do to fix that? Well, we found out that mushrooms breathe air like we do and exhale CO2. And so they were a natural amendment to the greenhouse. And then growing mushrooms, you find out that, this is a heck of a lot easier than raising fish and other vegetables. Why don't we just grow mushrooms? And, at some point, Kris and our other partner, Jorge, they grew a couple of ounces of mushrooms. That worked out great. And then when we grew, 2 pounds of mushrooms, we struck gold, guys. Let's do this.
That's pretty much it. We're like, it sells $20 a pound at the farmer's market. This is an infinite resource we could tap, not knowing that, there's other scales and factors. But that was pretty much the main drive that started it. And then looking from there, once we realized that, we had a product that we could grow in Arizona that traditionally doesn't grow without, sustained, environmental controls. That we really start to see that, okay, there might actually be something beyond that. You can sell 2 pounds at the farmer's market.
So, because I do think when I think about growing mushrooms, I think about a place like Pennsylvania, somewhere where they have caves, somewhere they can be grown in the dark and very high levels of humidity. And then the nutrient base often tends to come from, in the old days, it has to be pine products. They used to find in manure a lot. That was back in the day the number one growing field. And I think about Tucson, it doesn't naturally have those qualities.
Well, most of the industrial mushrooms that are grown today are grown on straw and other agricultural byproduct waste, and we have the same thing. We are operating on pretty much. We use hardwood fuel pellets, but that's also a byproduct of sawmills, or we could also easily use trimmings from around Tucson from different trees from like landscapers, or as far as using in mulch, and then also agricultural waste that goes into the production of how we make our mushrooms. Pennsylvania is famous. They do produce a lot of button top mushrooms, and it's a pretty much button top industry is extremely well established. Wholesale rates is about $1 per pound, and it's a competition of who can make it cheaper, closer to the dollar, and the large fish growers. But that's particular to field mushrooms and button tops.
Yeah, it's interesting that you point out Pennsylvania. That is considered the mushroom capital of the U.S. And like Kris indicated, it's been a long race to the bottom. A lot of the big name players in the mushroom industry focus solely on button top mushrooms, and what we mean by that is portobello, crenini, the white salad mushrooms. They're all the same species, really, just plucked at different times.
Surprisingly enough, like those brown mushrooms and portobello mushrooms are the same mushroom. It's just they're 3 days separated if they were plucked earlier. So they'll grow up and they'll be large and they'll expand their veils and they'll produce, and then that'll be a portobello mushroom as opposed to being a cremini, which is small and the veils haven't unveiled. And that's do a lot with how long it lasts on the shelf and just the diversification of the product.
Yeah, because I typically wouldn't have thought, well, actually not typically, I have not in my history thought of mushrooms as an alternative protein. I typically thought of them as a product that were added into a salad or into a cooked dish as a flavoring enhancer, or as a bulk enhancer to give more body to the product. It sounds like that, though, what I'm used to, which are those traditional mushrooms, that's about all I have had a history with, it is not what you grow and not what you sell. And therefore, it sounds like you're in a different marketplace. How confused am I?
You're on the right track. I think, that's an interesting distinction, it being in the same or a different marketplace. It is in the same marketplace, but a lot of people, they worry about some different factors, like, is this poisonous? Is it going to kill me? Am I going to have food poisoning? A lot of people steer clear of mushrooms because they just don't know what to do with it. Even people who are comfortable grilling or sauteing, cooking portobello mushrooms, they won't even touch our mushrooms for fear of messing it up. You have to have a little bit of an adventurous spirit in the kitchen to start cooking oyster mushrooms or chestnut mushrooms, piopini. Those are things you don't see in the grocery store unless you go to Sprouts or Whole Foods or AJ's. So the farmer's market, if you've ever stumbled around the farmer's market and you see all these different vegetables, like Romanescu is this like weird fractal looking cauliflower thing. I've seen that a few times, and I still ask myself, what the hell would I do with this if I bought one? How do I cook it? So a challenge for us is educating people who are curious, actually just bringing people in to buy our mushrooms sometimes. It's kind of difficult. Well, we're pretty much the only vendor at the farmers markets who have to actually hawk our product, like fresh mushrooms, and they're like, that doesn't look like a mushroom. What is that? Or that looks like a mushroom. Is it poisonous? Is it even edible? So we spend a good amount of our time educating people on how to cook these mushrooms. They cook up just like any other mushroom. Meat them to high heat. You can saute it, fry it, put it in soups, stews. Tell them about the flavor profiles, the texture profiles. And so they start thinking about it. They may not buy right away, but you've introduced, the possibility. And then the next time they walk by, okay, now I'm ready to try it. But
Are all mushrooms high protein source, or just the ones you grow?
no, all.
All of them actually are a complete protein. So I believe it's like there's 12 different amino acids, and the mushrooms have all of them in them. So you could replace your diet with mushrooms and as a supplement for like meats. They also are high in vitamin D. They're very much kind of very similar. I think they're closer to human DNA than they are than to actual plants. When they take in UV light, they produce vitamin D. So there's a lot of nutrients in there as well. There's not a very high amount of fat inside of mushrooms. But it is very high in protein.
Well, one of the things we talk about a lot
here
about
the
the show.
Sorry, Manny.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about a lot on the show is just aligning your business with trends and really deeply understanding your customer. And so, you're kind of dancing around a trend, which is the sort of the global movement away from animal products, animal meats. And, you mentioned
plant-based protein. The plant-based protein market is growing at a double-digit clip and will for a long time.
So how can you parlay your business and your reach to capitalize on that trend? Because a lot of people aren't really down for the Beyond Meat and the ground beef kind of slurry, soy slurry or whatever the hell it is that, is a meat substitute.
And I do also know that the soybean-based alternatives are very, very caloric. If you're eating tofu, you're not saving any calories versus eating meat. But I always understood that mushrooms are pretty low in calories. So is that true? Do you have this magical combination of high in protein and low in calories at the same time?
I believe it's mostly protein and small amount of carbohydrate. I don't really know how much of it. You have to look at the calorie table, but yeah, it's not as caloric dense as you would have meat. And so when you're cooking it, I recommend adding a lot of oil to it. One, for the flavor that's to it, but then you're also boosting the fat content that you would normally have. But yeah, no, I believe it's high in protein, but the amount that you would have versus that you would get is pretty minimal.
Going back to the sales trends and market demand, we often rely on partnering or collaborating and incentivizing local chefs. And, just the restaurant community in Tucson is so strong. It's, Tucson is regarded as one of the culinary destinations of America, at least by Zagat's, top 10 list. And a lot of fresh nouveau chefs like to play with, exotic ingredients. And we've got a strong clientele of restaurants who are willing to buy more expensive ingredients, even at our wholesale rates. They don't really bat an eye. It's nice to be able to stand on the shoulders of some well-established chefs that run, restaurants like Vivace or Maynard's or Hacienda del Sol Grill or the Grill at Ritz-Carlton, and they help promote our product. We also partner with some local private chefs, personal chefs rather, that will feature our mushrooms in some of the dishes that they make. So they kind of break the ice with the public. It's not just us trying to force feed literally mushrooms down our consumers' throats. It's we get a little bit of credibility from people who are already claiming our mushrooms, and that spreads in the community, especially in foodie Tucson. It helps a lot.
Is your target market the restaurant market, or is it retail consumer?
Currently, right now, it's retail and consumer. We're trying to expand our wholesale market. A few other things that we're also looking to expand upon is supplement production for more of the medicinal mushrooms that we grow. And some of that's going to be in the form of tinctures and dry powdered mushrooms capsules.
Why? if you're growing the mushrooms and you have a business that's going to the culinary elite, and you're bending off of that with your brand name and trying to grow retail presence and awareness, why would you want to do these medicinal products and these powdered products that you're talking about?
The margins are a lot friendlier with value-added products that we produce. So like tinctures, dried mushrooms, powdered mushrooms, mushroom supplements. Every step in processing has a substantial multiplier effect on the net margin that we pull from, per pound of mushrooms.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that kind of
But
goes
how?
to a question I have. The question I have kind of dovetails off of what Adam mentioned. So, you've got the consumer market, which are these big mushrooms that are, oyster mushrooms and other ones, and you've got the medicinal market, which are different mushrooms like the lion's mane and others that you mentioned. And what is your target? What is your mission in your company? Do you want to be a lifestyle business and service restaurants and be well known? When you walk into Vivace, you high five the maitre d' and you're kind of that guy, or do you want to be rich and driving a fancy car to wherever the hell you want?
well, I think money is always in the goal. I mean, it'd be nice to be rich, but the reality is that we understand we have to actually have a product that can work. So there are multiple routes we can go. We can go the wholesale route, in which case it's a race to the bottom. I mean, if I want to increase my poundage to 5,000 pounds a week in Arizona, I have to meet the price. There are other consumers that produce oyster mushrooms in California, and I have to match that rate that they're coming in. And the moment that I can match it, then I can probably kick most of the consumers out, most of the producers in California out, because my advantage is that I'm 2 to 3 days ahead of the production cycle in Arizona, because mushrooms only really have a week on the shelf that they can be. And if you're spending 2 to 3 days shipping them out from California to here, you've already lost those days in your shelf life. And so a lot of the vibrancy of our mushrooms are within the first 3 days, where they'll be eye-popping colors, they'll look perfect, they won't dry out as much, and then eventually they start to crack and they dry. And while you can still cook them in there and fine, your product's diminished as opposed to, if I'm growing out of California and trying to go in. So that is one possible route, is that we could do the full production route, go full bore, and then partner up with a wholesaler within Arizona and then take that route. The medicinal route is there are a bunch of products on the market which, they'll sell you, there's different stages in the mushroom cycle. It starts off where, we have a block that has mycelium, and that's what grows throughout all the different substrates. And then once you get it to a certain point where you put on the right substrate mixture, it'll fruit and produce a mushroom, which is like an apple of the tree. A lot of places that'll sell you mushroom supplements will sell you the mycelium powder, which is mushrooms just grown on corn, and then they'll dehydrate that and grind it up and put it in a capsule and sell it to you. The margins that they sell it to you is probably the markup would be, if I was to make a mycelium powder, it would probably, I don't know, let's just say it's $4 is what it would cost me to make, and then I would sell it to you at $40. And that's where all the industry you have. That's where you have Paul Stamets, which sells you, who's like the guru in mushroom, who sells you mycelium powder. You have other companies that are importing mushrooms and other parts from China, and they'll sell you supposedly organic fruiting bodies, but you have no idea where the application comes from, and they'll say they'll test it for heavy metals, but it could be just like a normal Chinese farm. But the margin for that you could have as far as a competing product that could be produced in the United States would have probably, I would say, better quality than what you would get. You could still make a lot of money on it. It's just a question of that's going to be a brand name in marketing. There's a lot of things that we can do, and I agree that the best route is to figure out which one is the better route. And I think the mission over us was to try and figure out, how can we produce, the best quality, diversified mushrooms and produce it to the market, and then grow that way.
We didn't all.
When you started the discussion, I was really impressed with the fact that you took two steps that I thought were great. You started off with what we call a value delivery system. I'm going to do hydroponic farming, okay? And so that's you don't have a value proposition there. You're just getting into a business, and it's all based around what you're going to do. Then you got a product, which was mushrooms. Again, okay, that's still businesses built that way don't tend to be very successful. But then you caught onto this trend, which was the alternative protein market, right? The plant-based proteins. That market's growing really, really fast. It's a double-digit growth rate. There's lots of alternatives in that, and it's true. People are looking for alternatives, as you said. Using the oysters instead of crab and things like in those kinds of applications, right? Now what's happened is the conversation now since then has drifted. And it's drifted back into sort of, well, we're in the mushroom business, and what do we want to do with mushrooms? And the thing is that you'll never get ahead of the game when you think of your business that way. because there's a lot of applications for mushrooms, but really to be successful, you have to know your customer, and you have to know your value proposition, and you have to constantly be focused on how am I delivering value? How am I delivering value? So while Roundup dehydrated mushrooms might have a much higher margin to them, the reality is you still haven't described in that marketplace how you're adding any value. What are you going to do that the competition doesn't do? How are is it something where you got to create a brand? And why? What's there? What's the demand? What's the unmet need? What's the undermet need? As far as I know, I haven't read anything saying that there's a shortage of mushroom powders or mushroom tinctures, or those sorts of products. I've not read anything about that. But I have read about there not being a sufficient amount of plant-based proteins in the marketplace. And I've certainly read a lot about some really big investments in plant-based proteins, upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars, and even some companies, a couple companies on IPO with billion-dollar valuations. Mm-hmm. So what started off really excellent, which was this discussion about how you went from thinking about your value delivery system, you're making mushrooms, into a value proposition, which was the alternative protein. Now it's drifted back into this whole other conversation. It's really focused around, well, what can we do with the mushroom and what are the margins in that? And that's a real risk that a lot of small business people have, because it seems like, whoa, over there in that marketplace, there's higher margin. Or over there, in that marketplace, I look like I have fewer competitors. And you end up standing there saying, I want to chase these markets. But that really doesn't get you to success. What gets you to success is saying, okay, there's a really unmet need, and I can meet that need, and I have a really strong value proposition for meeting that need. If I can meet the unmet plant-based protein needs of mushrooms, and I can do it in this geography of Tucson and surrounding area much better than the competition can, then you start there and you can build out from that. But what I would tell you is you won't succeed with two value propositions. If you're trying to say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do medicinal mushrooms, and I'm going to do these Roundup products, and if I'm going to go over here, and I'm also, by the same time, I want to do some stuff where I'm going to focus on restaurants, and then I want to go to the farm stands, and I'm going to try to run around and get some into the retailers. Look how you spread yourself out. Look how you're trying to be everything to all people around your product, and you'll look defocused. You won't get that value proposition built. And the people who do sit there and work on their value proposition of how they want to beat the market, they're going to beat you in every single one of those markets. That's the worry I have right now, listening.
Yeah, and we talk about the concept of a river. So you take your canoe, you put it in a river, and you can either fight the current or you can go with the current. Or you can try to go across the river, and there's other things you can do. Right now, the current is flowing like crazy in the protein alternative, meat alternative market. Adam mentioned, you could just do a search, and a friend of mine that runs one of these, he just got like $50 million investment to grow his basically a sausage. And so, if I was kind of in your position, I would consider, if you're going to go in that direction, you might as well just go with the flow. And, having run a business in the past where I was going in too many different directions, I can attest to that. It's good. It feels good because you think you're spreading out the risk and you're figuring out which one you want to go into. But at a certain point, you've got to really cut bait and say, okay, we're going to put all of our effort into this new direction. And it's got to be not in the value delivery per se, but in the value proposition itself.
Yeah, we could probably use a little help fine-tuning the value proposition, but to stay afloat, Tucson is it's a seasonal destination for a lot of people, snowbirds, even the college draw to Tucson. We only started doing sales at farmers markets last year during COVID because virtually 80+% of our clientele were restaurants. And when the governor shut down restaurants March of last year, we're producing about 200 pounds of fresh mushrooms a week, that restaurants were calling us left and right to cancel their orders. And these things are made to order for, bulk amounts. The lead time can be three weeks to a month and a half. So we started selling our mushrooms at farmers markets and realized, well, in order for us to continue paying the rent, we have to have different avenues of distribution and sales. And we also want to remain tangible in the eyes of our consumers, where if we're not competing with the product offerings of our direct competitors, we're not really a major player to consider. So things like tinctures, that's a big one. Things like dried mushrooms. Considering we have a lot of snowbirds that come, they like buying mushrooms dried just because they keep them in IVs. Or, some people will just throw them in soups or stews or rehydrate them, put them in their sautés. So it's typical for the specialty mushroom industry to have different things like that. We even sell grow supplies. People can grow their own mushrooms at home, or we've sold to the university. We've sold to a couple other mushroom producers in Tucson. So we kind of got backed into having to produce all these different things, but we definitely want to bolster our fresh mushroom sales.
No, yeah, and I have to agree with John on that, and I also agree with you guys. There is the business is not going to grow by the diversification of the product that we have at the current moment. It's just a factor of what we're doing with the additional product that we have. If I can't sell 30 pounds of lion's mane, it either goes in the trash or I dehydrate and I can make it into a second product. As far as going forward and saying like the business of just having a diversified mushroom farm that can sell multiple products, I do believe that you're correct. That's not going to be a thing that's going to lead us to Lamborghini money. It's going to be the thing that, might sustain the lifestyle business. And I would agree that, we have, the alternative protein thing is a big market. And a lot of that for us, that currently what we're doing is, we're trying to grow to where our position is, but to get to the wholesale market, there's some hurdles that we're going to have to really get past. And it comes out of the chicken and the egg situation. Is that to entice a wholesaler, I got to produce 1,000 pounds a week, which means I got to have the room for it.
I want you to rethink that again. Okay, once again, you're falling into generic business speak.
All right.
Right? We're back in again talking about, well, there's mushrooms, and this is how you sell mushrooms, wholesale. I want you to go back and think about your customers. Let's take the simple one. If you're going to sell at farmers markets, your number one objective is education. I have to educate a whole lot of people real fast on how to use this product, right, and get them to try it. And so I've got to educate them and get them into the experimental mode. That's very different than if you're selling into restaurants, where you're trying to help somebody be distinctive, distinguish their menu. And so you might want to be able to say to them, you're an excellent restaurant, but you could offer, if we worked with you, you could have 3 vegan dishes on the menu at all times. And you could try to, go for the vegetarians and the vegans as they come in the door. Because the needs of the restaurateur are different from the needs of the homeowner who's going to take it home and consume it. And to win at either of those, you have to be excellent at it. So, let's take, for example, the restaurateurs. Yes, you got Tucson, but you're very close to Phoenix and the towns surrounding Phoenix, Scottsdale and all that. So there's a lot of restaurants there. And you're not that far from Vegas. You could get started going to Vegas and calling on the casinos there. And then what you did, if your business grew, you could relocate more manufacturing and more value delivery, capabilities closer to these other markets, and you could help these restaurants be successful. On the other hand, if you want to be successful in the retail trade, again, you got to get into education. You're going to want to do a lot more writing. You're going to make pamphlets, hand them out to people. Here's a way to use our product. You maybe produce product in a little skillet at the farmers markets, do demonstrations, have people taste it, sample it, that kind of thing. So see, the needs of the customer are very different. And really the success and the decision you have to make now is, what need do you want to serve? Because I believe that you can make great mushrooms. And I believe that you can make them for restaurants, or you can make them for retail trade. You can make them for a grocery store trade. You can make them for the medicinal trade. I believe you can do all of that. The question you have to answer going forward is, which one of those markets do I want to be in, where I'm going to understand those user needs in depth so that I can really excel and grow? And that's the one you got to pick. Now, one of the things that we're, even if we get back to this, plant-based protein kind of idea, the needs of the restaurateur are very different from the needs of the retailer. So in the short term, you're saying, well, I'm making mushrooms and I got to get rid of them. If I don't get rid of them, they go bad and I'm going to lose money. That's absolutely correct. I mean, there's nothing way around that simple equation. But what we're saying is that if you're going to get out of the position you're in now and grow and get more successful, I will tell you today, you can get just as rich in any one of those markets by being very good at whichever one of those markets you pick. Look at Bezos. I mean, look how much money Bezos made, and he wasn't making any profits hardly for a long time, right? But what he did was he said, I'm really going to go after e-commerce and the needs of the e-commerce people, and he'd stay ahead of that, and I'm going to grow. And he was able to raise a lot of money, and he was able to make Amazon a very successful company. And that's what you really have to start saying now. The decision you have to make is which one of these markets do you really want to go after? And not just from a selling perspective, I make great product, but really more from I understand the needs of that customer. And I'm going to give that customer what he needs. So you, like I said, walk into the restaurateur and say, here's a list of vegan things you can put on your menu. Here's a list of vegetarian dishes. Here's ways this product has been used in creative ways. If you started to put this onto your menu, it would appeal to a different segment of customer. It would make, it would open up your offering. And you're going to help him be more successful. You're going to show him how to use the product, maybe, but mostly, unleash his creativity utilizing the product that you have for sale. But that's, again, that's going to take all of your energy. Yeah. And you won't really have much left for going after these farmers markets. But if you go to the farmers markets, that's going to take all your energy so that you can educate people, inform them, and get them to experiment. And you're not going to have a whole lot left for the restaurateurs. So just even those two is a selection you have to make, unless you decide you want to give all that up and go after the medicinal one, which is a completely different thing, because now you're out of the plant-based protein.
I mean, the way I see it is in a similar but different perspective. When you're selling at the farmers markets, you're selling to mushroom consumers and people that experiment with food. Small segment. When you sell to the restaurateurs, you're selling to chefs and professionals that know how to wield a knife and make that oyster mushroom into something amazing, right? But then their consumers are likely just mushroom consumers as well. When you're going after the plant-based protein alternative people, you are no longer selling to the mushroom consumer. You are now selling to the meat eater who eats meat twice a week and 5 days doesn't eat meat, like me, give or take. You're selling to the vegetarians and the vegans that are going into that domain. And you're not having to educate them on, this is an oyster mushroom, this is a lion's mane. All you have to say is, this is a plant-based product that tastes just like meat. And when they say, oh, yeah, this tastes good. What is it made out of? Oh, it happens to be made out of mushrooms. Wow, I didn't know mushrooms could taste this good. So our role here is to be educated by you, but also to educate and to kind of prod and poke a bit, because we want you to be successful, and we want to bring you back on the show in 6 months or a year with you have resounding success, and so that's what we want. Any final questions for us, gentlemen?
Oh no, that's pretty much what we expected. I agree. I mean, being the jack of all trades isn't going to be the thing that makes us prosperous. It might get us to a certain level of success and then flatline. And what's really going to accelerate things is just focusing on one aspect of it. And I guess just this typical conundrum we have in our head is just how do we stay afloat and how do we make it to the next stage so we can move on. But I do agree that at some point all of us are going to have to think about what's going to be our focus and what's going to be the main drive, because there's only going to be one thing that's really going to take us to success if we just focus on it. I think one of the biggest things I remember is, like, if you try chasing all the rabbits, you're only going to catch none. But if you focus on chasing one, you might be able to catch it. So
yeah, and people write books on that. The one thing, Gary Keller, right? To focus on the one thing. That's how he grew his real estate brokerage to multinational, multi-billion-dollar brokerage. But focus on basics.
And just keep in mind, don't let your passion necessarily drive what you do. We tend to do that, right? As entrepreneurs, we'll tend to say, well, I really enjoy this, so I want to go that way. Remember what Manny said, about the notion that really what you want to do is you want to go the way where the market is the easiest, where it's growing the fastest. I mean, as he said, you want to find a way to put your canoe in the river where you don't have to paddle. Just being there is going to make you successful. And a guy that we quote that wrote a long time ago about trends used to say, the easiest way to ride a horse is to go the direction he wants to go. Don't try to grab the reins and change direction. So don't let your passion drive this decision. Try to get really, thoughtful about which one of these market opportunities is going to grow. And then I want to put my energy in that direction, because I'll get the most out of it. You're going to get further along if you're rowing with the current. So where's the current the strongest? How do you get into that part of the river with the strong current and let it carry you along, making it easier for you to sell, where you don't have to do all the heavy lifting of market development, et cetera.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed it. And certainly we invite all of our guests and viewers and listeners to go to our website, sparkpartners.com, where you can learn more about what we offer to help your business grow, as well as learn about our training materials and watch other podcasts. So with that, I'll be signing off from Tucson. We'll talk to you guys later. Adam, we'll see you.